Everybody wants to be a gladiator. The mount, the prestige, the tens of thousands of Goldshire hotties screaming your name as you walk through the Elwyn Forest. Put on that title and ride about on that ugly bat mount and suddenly you're a rock star, baby. But with the meta constantly shifting, figuring out what comps to run feels like solving a puzzle with missing pieces. No one wants to queue into misery playing a dead comp. You've got better things to stress about. So today, we're breaking it all down, class by class, comp by comp, with a juicy tier list to help you get that pro status, or at least fake it till you make it. Do you know what the #1 difference is between gladiators and you? It's time. And unless you've spent hours building a spaceship UI like the top players have, you're missing critical info every game. That's where we come in. Our fully upgraded Season 2 UI makes tracking cooldowns, CC chains, kill setups, and danger windows effortless. It gives you the same clarity the pros rely on, so you can actually react in time. And forget spending hours configuring add-ons, we've done the hard part for you. Every setting optimized, every frame ready to go. Just install and queue. We've also updated every class course for Season 2, including full breakdowns of how every spec sets up kills, and more importantly, why, allowing you to start predicting plays instead of just responding to them. Everything we offer is backed up by a rank of guarantee, where we promise you will gain 400 rating while using our service. Sound good? Then hit the exclusive discount link in the description and start climbing today. So before we start, you may be wondering what makes a solid S-tier comp skill capped. Well, like in the past, it's whichever Mortal Strike melee hits the hardest and has the most control to enable their S-tier caster counterpart. That's why we're going to be filling this tier with the classic duo of Outlaw Rogue and Feral, who have been dominating the S tier in AWC for the entire expansion. On EU, Feral has been played in the majority of high-rated games in Season 1, and Season 2 is not looking any different, despite some small nerfs to their Mortal Strike effect and rip damage. Ferals just have it all for so many comps. 3 different stuns allows them to swap around on every diminishing return and play for setups or raw pressure. Cyclone allows them to bait out kicks for their caster comrade, enabling them to blast out disgusting DPS uninterrupted. And Incarnation is one of the best tools for finishing out games and dampening, which fortunately lines up with their best buddies cooldowns of Elemental's Ascendance, Frost Mage's Icy Veins, or a Hunter's Call of the Wild. And if all that wasn't enough, Ferals can also be incredibly difficult to take down thanks to all their defensives, especially when paired with the snares of a Frost Mage or off-healing of a Shaman. Outlaw Rogues, on the other hand, are slightly falling out of favor in the meta ever since their new Feint talent received the fair but devastating nerf, making them die far easier than before. But if you pair up with a Frost Mage or Affliction Warlock on caster and a Holy Priest or Resto Druid on healer, you're going to be destined for success no matter what comes your way thanks to Outlaw's incredible CC potential. Outlaws are the true enablers of Arena, and whenever a caster is strong, they will always be there to hold their hand to cross over the finish line by covering interrupts and allowing them to free cast whenever they need to. Ferals and Outlaws aren't our only S-tier melee though, as after recent buffs, Demon Hunters have blade danced themselves into the top spot. This is because Demon Hunters are just dealing unhealable damage with their I-Beam and Essence Break window, which pairs nicely with Elemental's Primordial Wave cooldown, allowing the team to 100-0 a target every 45 seconds, which was shown over and over again in the most recent AWC from Chibaku Tensei, who literally one-tricked Demon Hunter Elemental Shaman to win Cup 2. Now, along with their crazy amounts of damage, Demon Hunters are also pretty difficult to kill when paired with the Restoration Druid thanks to their short cooldown on Blur and ability to glimpse out of danger. Although they'll probably still tell you they die in stuns, like that's some rare phenomenon in World of Warcraft. Next up, we've got the Warriors, not you, Prot. And both Arms and Fury are absolutely crushing it on the damage meters right now. Arms and Fury are pretty interchangeable at the moment, though Arms has the edge when it comes to target swaps and landing those massive one-shot crits. Fury, on the other hand, brings a brutal Mortal Strike effect that makes healing through its pressure feel impossible. Given their raw damage output, Warriors shine when paired with casters who let them stay glued to a target. Elemental Shamans and Mages are ideal as they can largely fend for themselves and don't need constant babysitting. And for all you melee cleave enjoyers, pairing up with the Feral or Ret Paladin still works. Just be ready for an even rougher time against Mages than usual. Although if the NA AWC has taught us anything, it's that not even the hardest counters can break through this comp's brick wall defense. Next up, we have a new S-tier caster in town as Elemental Shaman finds itself Gust of Winding into first place. It turns out that buffing literally every single ability they have on a scale of 10 to 500% is actually pretty significant. Who didn't see that coming? And when you couple that with the recent nerf to frost mages, elemental shamans are finding themselves in a favorable position where they really have no counterclass that can stand up against them without them being obliterated in the process. Thanks to their bulky nature, insane sustain, and a built-in I win button every 30 seconds, elemental shamans are syncing up beautifully with the high sustain melee DPS like demon hunters, feral druids, and both warrior specs. Backed by meta healers like resto druids and holy priests, these comps are taking over the meta, though if you're feeling bold, you can even try slotting in a holy paladin for a real challenge. Rounding out our S-tier casters are the recently nerfed frost mages, and somehow, despite taking a relentless beating from the nerf bat, they still are finding themselves in the top spot. This is largely thanks to Icy Veins being so overtuned that a few damage and haste nerfs here and there haven't really made much of a dent to their success. Frost Mage's toolkit is just too stacked for the kind of damage they bring, and with all their control and survivability, they're basically unkillable until deep into dampening, and that's only after you've managed to force out both ice blocks. Frost Mages are also benefiting hugely from crowd control not breaking, allowing them to set up snowdrift stuns far easier than before for even longer CC chains, while still having that deadly ice wall in their back pocket to create a pseudo smoke bomb and drop targets out of thin air. Needless to say, you can pretty much pair any meta Mortal Strike melee with a Frost Mage and succeed, but you will have the most success with a Rogue, Feral, or Warrior due to their pressure and control. And if you're in the mood for even longer games than usual, pairing up with a Demonology Warlock is a great way to truly make your opponents miserable as they fume in never-ending crowd control chains. Moving on to the A tier now, we have Windwalker Monks leading the charge. Now, we had a really tough time with placing Monks this week after their recent performance in the US AWC, where they seem to dominate when paired with an Elemental Shaman or Frost Mage. Their high burst damage and leg sweep synergize well with casters, and when paired with a Resto Druid or Holy Priest, they can create devastating CC chains, often securing a win almost instantly with well-timed paralysis setups. However, on the EU side of things, this just didn't shine through, as Monks tended to do pretty poorly as their weaknesses shone through instead. This was due to their stun being such a long cooldown compared to that of a Feral or a Rogue, which leaves them at a huge disadvantage, as well as them being very susceptible to being crowd controlled in between setups, which is incredibly painful as a brawler class, causing their damage to fall off drastically. So while Windwalkers don't quite crack the S tier, we're placing them solidly in A tier this week. Expect strong performance when paired with Ellie Shamans, Frost Mages, and even the occasional wildcard like Outlaw Rogues, which can make up for their lack of CC. Next up are Beast Mastery and Marksmanship Hunters, who find themselves in a similar spot as Windwalker Monks. Both specs are individually strong, feeling surprisingly tanky while dishing out absurd damage, especially against cloth targets. However, in a meta that isn't just packed with mage prey, Hunters also have to contend with the Predators, Warriors and Shamans, who turn games into a living nightmare. This is because both Shamans and Warriors deal near unhealable damage to Hunters, who simply can't shake them off. Their signature win condition, Stun into Trap, becomes nearly impossible to pull off when you're either dead or forced to fight through Grounding Totem and relentless stuns. Beast Mastery in particular is really struggling in the current meta, especially on the new Cage of Carnage map, where the terrain can be abused to make their pets practically useless as they endlessly chase targets up and down the ramps. And if you factor in the fact that Restoration Druids with their Mass Entanglement are the second most popular healer, then being a pet class just kinda sucks. That said, Hunters are still absolutely shredding cloth classes. So grab your favorite Feral Druid, Rogue, or Ret Paladin, and you'll still have a solid shot at Gladiator. And speaking of mages, Arcane is also sitting comfortably in the A tier for Season 2. Arcane's damage is strong, and it's nearly impossible for melee to lock down, making it a nightmare in comps that revolve around kiting and slowly winning and dampening. Unfortunately for Arcane, those dampening strategies can be tough to execute when Elemental Shamans and Hunters are all over the ladder, which keeps it just shy of S tier. That said, if you team up with the Resto Druid or Holy Priest for longevity and solid stuns, plus a Windwalker, Warrior, Feral, or a Sub-Rogue if you're Cubsy, you've got the potential to one-shot people with minimal CC. For other classes, crowd control is crucial, and Sub-Rogues are the undisputed kings of it. Sub-Rogues are finally dealing respectable damage, and while Shadowy Duel has been removed, it doesn't seem to matter much in a meta dominated by high burst damage. Meta classes like Hunters and Holy Priests synergize well with Sub-Rogues, as they can land their instant CC simultaneously, setting up overwhelming bursts where the enemy team struggles to react. But even if you can't execute these goes perfectly, eventually a well-timed smoke bomb or ice wall from your mage can score the end of the game, so don't stress too much about it being difficult. The only reason sub-rogues aren't in the S tier right now is that while their burst is incredibly high, their sustained damage is lacking, making them terrible brawlers, while also having pretty annoying counter comps in the meta like Ret and Warrior, which can completely negate their goes. So if you don't win in those setups, you will eventually get ran over. Dropping down to the B tier now, we sadly have every single lock spec in the game. Destruction, Demonology, and Affliction are all being left behind this season. Every meta class seems to counter them, whether it's rooting Demo's pets, dispelling Affliction's dots, or simply deleting them before they can get their damage out. Warlocks are having a rough time in Season 2. The only glimmer of hope for the Goth Wizards is pairing with a class that can slow the game down, like a Rogue or Feral Druid, to create windows for Haunts or Chaos Bolt, but you're going to have to put a lot of work in to get these setups off. If you're more of a Demonology fan, however, you might try your luck with a Frost Mage or Elemental Shaman, but be ready to work 500 times harder than every other team. Your only real win condition is deep dampening with perfectly timed CC chains. And despite that 20% buff to Wild Imps, we're not expecting Demonology to rise the ranks anytime soon. But while Demonology is getting some laughable buffs, some classes like Ret Paladins are getting some substantial ones, like 40% to Dawnlight and 50% to Sun's Avatar, abilities that are already doing a large portion of their overall breakdown. Because of these buffs and the classes that typically synergize with Rets being pretty strong like Warriors and Hunters, we're expecting Rets to have an excellent remainder of Season 2. Although, due to their lack of Mortal Strike, the amount of comps they can play are, as always, pretty limited. Moving on, and then we have Big Mech's Hunter. Survival. Beast Mastery and Marksmanship's ugly brother. Survival is actually pumping out solid damage right now, and with traps no longer breaking from your basic rotation like they used to, it feels like it has A or even S tier potential, which is especially true with Mending Bandage being so powerful into those ferals that you seem to face every third game on ladder. However, with Melee and Elemental Shamans running wild this season, you're often going to be eating a hammer or a lava burst anytime you try to push in. That usually means spending most of the match kiting or running for your life until you can set up a proper go. Because of that, the best comps for survival right now are ones that enable your trap setups. Think Ferals, Rogues, or Ret Paladins. And as always, bring an offensive healer to crank up the pressure with extra damage, purges, and CC. Next up, we then have Shadow Priests, who are having a very rough time in threes this season, once again due to every melee in the game dealing infinite DPS. Shadow just can't shake off a good warrior or windwalker, and even if you do, the Holy Priest on the other team is probably playing double dispel and is ready to ruin your day regardless. Because of this, the best comp you can play on Shadow is one that either tanks kicks for you like with Demonology Warlock, or one that creates so much pressure that they cannot afford to ignore your partner all game, like Axton's team in the AWC running Feral Resto Druid Shadow. Although this comp does have limited success. Speaking of limited success, have you seen a Fire Mage recently? I know I haven't. Fire Mages, despite receiving numerous buffs, sadly still suck. Their damage is weak, their defensives are even weaker, and quite frankly, there's zero reason to play Fire over Arcane or Frost. You'll still find yourself playing the same comps, but it's just going to have less pressure while being more vulnerable. This is really the recurring theme of the B tier. These classes are squishy as hell, which brings us to the next contender, Boomkin. Much like Fire Mage, Boomkin keeps getting a sprinkle of buffs every patch. Maybe a little extra Star Surge damage here, a bit more Moonfire DPS there, but the core issue never gets addressed. They just flop over and die. Boomkins can't damp, they can't avoid damage, and they have to stay in the fight to land Cyclones, making them a nightmare to keep alive when melees are running the show. Oh, and don't forget there's literally not a single class in the game that sits Root Beam anymore. If you're wondering what your best shot is, try Boomkin/Rogue/Preservation, or hope a Demon Hunter takes pity on you. You can make it work, but expect an uphill battle the entire way. Moving on, we have Devastation Evokers, who were a really high contender for the A tier. The only thing keeping Devastation down right now is the fact that they need to go in very deep to deal damage. However, the healers that enable this playstyle right now, namely Fistweavers and Preservation Evokers, are pretty weak in the current meta, which leaves Devastation in a spot. They deal a ton of damage, they have decent defensives and can kite most melees in the game, but they just don't really synergize with anything in the meta. Because of this, Devastation falls into the B tier. However, there are definitely matchups where its strongest compositions, such as Feral Devastation and Warrior Devastation, can outpressure some of the S tier casters. Finally, we have Assassination Rogues, who have fallen off dramatically this season compared to Season 1. This is because Assassination just can't hang with the big boys and gets crushed by literally any melee in the game. And with all their best comps revolving around playing with casters who are also sitting in the B tier, it's not hard to figure out why Assassination Rogues are struggling. Next up is the C tier, home to the gimmick-heavy classes, and yep, leading the charge here are Frost Death Knights. With one-shots that are more predictable than the ending of a Disney movie, Frost DKs bring massive burst with their Pillar of Frost, and then vanish like a bad magic trick. These one-shots might feel OP at lower ratings, but the higher you climb, the more you'll realize that banking everything on one win condition is a fast track to frustration. That said, you can squeeze out some value pairing with a Windwalker, Monk, or Devastation Evoker to add extra lockdown and more setups every 30 seconds. But let's be honest, it's still a rough ride. If Frost Death Knights are the kings of gimmicks, then Augmentation Evokers are the queens, and with a recent 8% buff, don't be surprised if a few more start popping up on the ladder. But with such a telegraphed win condition revolving around landing Deep Breath, your success rate is likely to dip once people figure out how to counter it. Although we could see a world where pairing yourself up with an S-tier melee could work out, since you will still be buffing their damage through your ebb and might. Think of augmentation like Devastation, except you're trading consistency for Twitch clips. And then there was the D tier, for downright disgustingly bad. These specs are so atrocious in 3v3 that you're going to have the bumpiest ride possible, but hey, nothing's impossible. Landing in the D tier this season is, of course, Enhancement Shaman, a spec that somehow gets buffed every patch and still manages to be underwhelming. Enhance is just fundamentally flawed. It's supposed to be a brawler, but it can't trade with other melee without putting itself at serious risk. It struggles even more against casters, lacking the mobility to reliably stick to its targets, and worst of all, the infamous one-shot that gave it an identity doesn't even one-shot anymore. And it's not like their consistent damage is even that impressive either. That said, you can make it work by riding on the shoulders of a warrior, but you're better off just speccing Elemental and flipping your character from D to S tier. Rounding out the tier list is Unholy Death Knight, a spec that brings low damage and some of the weakest defensives in the game. And before you come at us for ranking DK low, yeah, we've seen the one tricks climbing the ladder, but let's be honest, those players are outliers. Just because a few can make it work doesn't mean the spec's in a good spot overall. Because when you really look at DK, Frost at least has a gimmick to lean on. Unholy? Nothing. And to make matters worse, its entire pet toolkit ends up benefiting specs like Ellie Shamans and Ferals, feeding them free funnel targets and making your own life harder. Unholy is basically a glass cannon, except someone forgot to install the cannon. It's got all the fragility, but none of the firepower. However, if you're truly committed to the unholy life, your best bet is to team up with a Beast Mastery Hunter or Warrior and pray you can overwhelm the enemy before they outlast you. Remember, the best 3v3 strategies can be only found at skillcap.com. Just select whatever spec you're currently playing, and then find the matchup you struggle with. Click one of these. Our team of pro players will guide you step by step through your hardest counters, teaching you secret tricks you wish you had learned earlier. SkillCap members also get instant access to hundreds of videos, including class courses, role tips, positioning guides, and a brand new course that teaches you how to counter every class in the game. Best of all, everything we offer is backed up by a rank up guarantee. If you don't gain at least 400 rating while using our service, you'll get a full refund, no questions asked. That's going to be it for now. Thank you all for watching. See you soon.